Tonight, we want to take a look at what the book of Proverbs has to say about helping us to get a grip on money and our use of money. Proverbs has about 915 verses in it, and 150 of them deal with money in some way. So you can tell it's a very significant topic in that book. Now, there are many different words that they use in this study. Wages, inheritance, prosperity, rich, wealth. We won't have time to look at all these words, but we're going to take a look at several key verses. And I've really asked some of you already to give me a little help, all right? So I have given out some coins tonight, and on them were references. So when we come to your reference, if you would stand up and kind of read your verse nice and loud so we can hear what God has to say about money. Now, these first set of verses here are going to help us to look at what God says about some of the sources that we have for getting money. Now, some of these are going to be good sources, okay? And some of them are going to be not so good. Now, I'm sort of paying you to read your verse, right? Because I gave you a coin. And here's what the deal is, though, okay? If your verse talks about a good source of money, you get to keep the coin, all right? But if your verse is not such a good source of money, then you need to put it in the offering plate, okay? We'll give it back to God, all right? So, our first verse from Proverbs 3, 13 and 14.
Blessed is the one who finds wisdom and the one who gets understanding. For the gain from her is better than gain from silver, and her profit better than gold.
What it's saying to us is that wisdom is a source for us to have financial gain in our life. The gain that we get from using God's wisdom is even better than the gold or silver itself. So wisdom is basically skill for living life as God wants it to be lived. Or we could say it another way, wisdom is applying God's word to our life as we make our daily decisions. So we're walking in alignment with how He has told us to live. So that's a good source. You get to keep the coin, okay? All right, Proverbs 10, 2.
Wealth has no lasting value, but right living can save the life.
It says that ill-gotten gains do not profit. They don't really have a lasting value. You may make a quick bit of money the wrong way. I'm thinking of con artists, all right? We have a lot of those in our world today. You'll get scams that are on your texts or on your email all the time. I read about one man who put an advertisement in a magazine. He said, for $48.95, you can have a solar dryer. So thousands of people thought, really? $50 we can have a solar dryer? We have to pay for the electricity for that thing? So they sent in their $48.95 or whatever he's actually advertising for. So he sent them an envelope like this. And when they opened it up, it was a piece of string and a couple of clothespins. You let your clothes dry out in the sun, all right? So I'd say that was a little dishonest, huh? So he may have gotten some profit, but God says in the end that ill-gotten gains are not really going to bring lasting profit. In fact, the second line goes on to say that it's the righteous or gaining it in the right way that delivers us from death. So the implication is that there's going to be a payday someday for you ripping off people to get the money to get ahead. God keeps track of everything, and if you get money the wrong way, then someday you'll have to answer to Him. You may get away with it temporarily. It may put you ahead for the moment, but God has a way of reshuffling the deck and putting you back where you belong because you did not get it the right way. Proverbs 10:4.
Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth.
So here we have diligence. So here we see a contrast throughout the book of Proverbs between the diligent and the lazy or the sluggard. And here it says that the one who works with a negligent hand, a slack hand, he's going to be poor. But the hand of the diligent is one that makes rich. Okay, so the ideal here is that have a good work ethic and do what you're being paid to do. Don't try to cheat your boss. Don't just do your job when the boss is watching, but be diligent. And God says He notices and He can reward. Now, I know sometimes we have jobs, we work hard, and we might not get what we think we deserve for that job. But again, who's watching? God. And that's why he tells us in the New Testament that do everything as if you're doing it for the Lord. Do it for his glory, and he will reward you. So have a good work ethic. And today's world, that's really important. It can get you a good job, because that's what a lot of companies are finding. It's hard to find employees that are really going to be diligent. Okay, 19:14.
House and wealth are inherited from fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord.
It says that house and wealth can be from or are from our parents. It's just saying that often parents do pass on something to their children, or they open up the doors for you to get the job or help to get you a start in life. So there can be wealth and possessions that are directly attributed to the work that your parents have done for you. Perhaps it's even by the way that they invested in your education and prepared you for the job that eventually opens up that door for your physical needs. But I like the second part. Not everything can come from your parents, all right? It says that a prudent wife or husband is from the Lord. So it's saying parents can do a lot for you, but in the end, you should really put your trust in the Lord and be trusting him for that right marriage partner. And don't wait till you really feel like getting married, okay? Start praying early. We started praying for the spouses for our children when they were tiny. As soon as they came into our house, we started praying for God to be preparing the mate for them so that they could live a godly life, a life of wisdom, and fulfill all that God had created them to do. What about 21:6?
Making a fortune through a lying tongue is a vanishing mist, the pursuit of death.
So here it's pointing out the fact sometimes money is gained by deceit. Again, you got to watch some of those advertisements, right? Everything is talked up so big, and you think you're getting the greatest version of it, but many people, many companies even, purposely deceive you, okay? So a lying tongue may get the treasure, but it's a fleeting vapor. Again, it's saying that what they gain is not going to be lasting. It's like the wind. It's like chasing the wind. It's trying to grasp at the wind. And God says he will take that from them someday. Okay? It's like what Jesus said in the New Testament about the man who you can gain the world but lose your soul. Even Proverbs says that it's better to have little but be a person of integrity than be a person with a lot and not be living for the Lord. Proverbs 22:4.
But humility and the fear of the Lord are righteous, and honor and life.
Here, two characteristics are mentioned that if these are true of your life, then God is promising a spatial blessing on your life. Now, he doesn't say what that'll be. He doesn't promise that you're going to be a millionaire, but he says riches and honor will come from you putting me first. The fear of the Lord, we've taken a look at that too in our study already. The fear of the Lord is recognizing that every thought you have, every word that you say, every action that you take in life is being looked at from heaven. God sees you and he knows. And if you fear him and you recognize that someday, not only does he see you, but you have to give an account for how you live and how you think and how you talk. So living in the fear of the Lord makes you humble, right? You realize where you belong. He's above you. I have to live in a way that honors and pleases the Lord. So God says that humility, I think, will flow out of that fear of the Lord. And he promises to bless you and provide for you if you do fear him. Okay? Proverbs 22:16.
Whoever oppresses the poor to increase his own wealth or gives to the rich will only come to poverty.
Ooh. So here he's talking about oppressing the weak, taking advantage of people. Of course, we might think of slumlords, those who have these lousy apartments, but they charge high rents because they're taking advantage of people's need for some place to live. And so they don't care about the people that are staying there, what conditions they're putting them in. They just care about the money or taking advantage of them in some other way. It's like ill-gotten gains that we spoke of earlier. And God says, you may get ahead, you may get some money, but again, it's temporary. Also talks about in that second line about giving to the rich. Actually, the word for giving there is the word that could be translated bribe. So it says that you will also come to poverty if you give to the rich, if you try to pay bribes. And the idea is that often when you try to pay money to get ahead, they keep the money, but they don't give you the favor. So you can suffer financially because you're trying to pay off them in some way, but it doesn't lead to the success that you're looking for. It's not God's way of getting things done. So that's not a good way to get money. Proverbs 23:4.
Do not wear yourself out to get rich. Be wise enough to restrain yourself.
Okay, great. Now, this is not diligence. This is not working hard to make $1. This is like working too hard, or putting such a focus on getting rich, gathering wealth, gathering possessions. So I call this the Workaholic Verse, okay? This is saying if you put money first and you spend your life trying to gain all that money, then he says you're going to weary yourself. And it says to cease from even thinking about it. Don't even put it in your mind. One of the guys who did that, maybe some of you have heard of Dave Ramsey. He has a popular radio and podcast that reaches about 17 million people each week. And he was somebody who set the goal of getting rich quick. So he graduated from college with a business degree in 1982. And by 1986, his assets were worth $4 million. That's pretty good, right? In 4 years out of college. But guess what happened in the same year? He went bankrupt. He lost everything. I've heard him give his testimony before. He said, I wanted the fancy car. I wanted a Jaguar. That was my ideal car. I wanted to drive around in a big Jaguar. He said, I had the Jaguar, but I didn't have enough money to put gas in the tank. He was so poor and he lost everything. His focus was on gaining money. So he made some financial decisions in real estate. He borrowed too much. Somebody else bought the bank out that he borrowed the money from and said, you have to pay me now. And so he lost everything the same year that he was worth $4 million. So there's the warning that God gives. Don't sacrifice your family. Don't sacrifice your relationships. Don't sacrifice your relationship with God in that push to get more. Because if that's your push, guess what? You never get enough. Somebody asked John D. Rockefeller once, who was one of the first millionaires and then first billionaire, and they said, well, how much is enough, Mr. Rockefeller? He says, just a little bit more, just a little bit more. He could never reach that line where he felt like, okay, I have enough. So beware, look at your schedule. Is this too much of a priority? Do I need to back off so that I don't sacrifice my relationship with my children or my wife or husband or friends? Or many people don't have time for church because they're pressing for just a little bit more. So that's the warning. 28:24.
Whoever robs his father or his mother and says, that is no transgression, is a companion to a man who destroys.
Wow. So this is elder abuse, we could say. And this happens all over the world, doesn't it? Where children now, they don't want their parents spending their inheritance. They figure out how they can get it sooner. This is like the prodigal son who didn't want to wait until the father died to get his share. He wanted it now. So some children look at ways to actually steal from their parents. I know someone who was watching over his father's finances. So he wanted to build a new house. And so he just wrote enough checks to build a house. And he never asked permission to use that money. But because he was in charge of the checkbook, he thought, why not? He's not using it right now, so I can. And he wasn't making near the money to be able to pay that back. Okay, so that's outright taking from your parent and putting them in a difficult situation. Now, Jesus talked about that in the New Testament, both in Matthew and Mark, where he said some children try to make it spiritual. There was the obligation, the fifth commandment says, honor your father and your mother. This is the first commandment with the promise. And Jesus said, but some children who were supposed to be taking care of their parents said, well, the money that was set aside and supposed to be used to take care of my parents, I call that korban, which meant instead of giving it to my parents to help them in their need, I'm setting it aside to give to God's work. And Jesus said, this is not right. You're taking the tradition of man and breaking God's law. So any way you look at it, taking money that doesn't belong to you, whether it's even helping yourself at work to things that don't really belong to you. You think, well, look, they don't pay me what I deserve. So you try to help yourself and stick things in your pocket and walk out, or take money from the cash drawer or whatever. These are all ways that you may temporarily get ahead or be able to pay a bill that you need to pay. But God says you're not really going to get ahead. And lastly, Proverbs 31:16.
She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard.
Okay, I think most of us know who Proverbs 31 talks about, right? This is the virtuous woman. This is Supermom. And there's so many good characteristics in there, but if you actually read those verses from like 14, 15, and 16, you'll see that she is somebody who has done well. She plans ahead. She buys this field and she knows how to invest. She makes investments not for her gain, but it's her way of also providing for her family. So she is using money, not just spending it, but she's investing it for the future of her family. And that is something that is virtuous. By considering it, it means that she's making a plan. This is not just well, let me spend this money for this. No, she's calculating that if I put my money here, this is what's going to happen, and it will provide for us over here. God says that's a good thing. So we could say business savvy, okay? Some of you have that. But this is learning how to handle the money that God puts in your hand. These are some good ways for us to keep in mind that if we want to gain wealth, we want to do it God's ways. And there are ways to avoid. So we need to ask ourselves, are we shading in any of these bad areas? Because God is watching and God wants us to gather our wealth in the right way. Now let's look at Proverbs 10:22. Would somebody read that? Proverbs 10:22.
The blessing of the Lord makes rich, and he adds no sorrow with it.
So again, the Lord says that he wants to bless his children, especially those who are walking with him, those who are walking in wisdom. And so one of the ways that God rewards those who walk in his way is to take care of them financially. And when he gives you things, there's no sorrow that's added to it, no anxiety. You don't have to worry about it because it came by the hand of God. He wants you to recognize that what you do have came from who? God. Whether it's from your business savvy or whether it's from your inheritance or whether it's from wise investments or whatever, God's saying, really look to me as the ultimate source of whatever you had. Now, as we've studied the book of James previously, we called it the Proverbs of the New Testament, okay? Because James likes to quote from many of these Proverbs and put it in a New Testament context. And so he does that in James 1:17. Here the verse says, every good thing bestowed and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of light, with whom there is no variation or shifting shadow. Okay, so God says everything that we need to see, everything that we have is from his hand. Even if your boss is the one who pays you, you need to ultimately look that it came from God. He provided you the work, he gave you the health, he gave you the mind or the training, experience, or whatever is needed to keep that job. So God says, honor him, look to him, don't trust in your money, look to God as the ultimate source of everything that he has blessed you with. Now there's actually some things that Proverbs says are better than wealth. So let's read 16:16 first. It says, how much better it is to get wisdom than gold, and to get understanding is to be chosen above silver. So wisdom, he says, is something that's better than gold or silver, which are the most precious metals that have been in cultures throughout the history of man. What about 22:1? What does it say is better than wealth?
Good things to be more desired than great wealth. Favor is better than silver.
Okay, so a good name, a good reputation is better than wealth. When people hear your name, what comes to their mind? Is it something good? That's what he's saying here. Strive to have godly character more than wealth, because a good name is better to have than riches. Now, Proverbs 17:16 kind of lets us know why. Somebody read that?
Why should a fool have money in his hand to buy wisdom when he has no sense?
So really what he's saying here is wealth without wisdom is Worthless. He may have money in his hand, but he's trying to buy wisdom. Can you buy wisdom? No, you can't. So he doesn't even know that. He doesn't know how to handle his money. So if you don't have wisdom, then the money that God gives you can easily be gone like that. So God says to strive after wisdom because it's better than wealth, and it will enable you to keep the wealth or make good use of it as God puts it in your hand. Now, let's look quickly. I think there are three main uses of money that not just Proverbs talks about, but really as you look at the whole Bible. Of course, we know about this area, right? Spending. Proverbs 3:27 says,
Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in your power to do it.
now I'm going to say this is basically talking about pay your bills. Pay it on time. Don't hold back. If you got the money, don't give an excuse. Pay it. Don't try to cheat somebody. Now, in that day, it was especially important to pay those who were working for you because people live day to day. And if you withheld the money that you owe them for today's work, they may not have enough money to buy food to feed their family the next day. So he's just saying one of the good uses of money is to pay our bills, to pay for the services that we benefit from as a family. And 13:25.
The righteous has enough to satisfy his appetite, but the belly of the wicked suffers want.
So here we're talking about food. That's a good use of money. The righteous, or the one who is wise in his use of money, is going to be satisfied. He's going to have the food that he needs. But the belly of those who squander foolishly what has gone through their hands, they're going to have empty stomachs themselves. So again, food is one of those things that we spend. In fact, it's a big thing that we spend our money on, isn't it? Proverbs 31, we read verse 16, but if we read these verses right in front of it, it says, she is like merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She rises also while it is still night and gives food to her household and portions, not just to her household, but to her maidens, to her servants. So here's somebody who has invested it, so she has it, and she is willing to spend it to provide for the needs of her family and those who even serve her family. Ecclesiastes, which was also written by Solomon, there he adds another little note. He says, really, you know that ability to gain money and spend it for your satisfaction, your physical needs? He says that really is a gift from God. You should recognize that that ability to have the money to meet your physical needs is a reward from God. So even though it's not in Proverbs, it's written by the same man who gave us these other ideas on spending. Now, here's another of the three main uses of money, and that's giving. Proverbs 3, 9, and 10. What does this tell us about giving?
Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine.
So he's saying, when you give, don't wait till the end of the month to decide what you're going to give to God. He's really saying, look up front. When he says, give to the Lord of your first produce, of your first fruits, you know what he's saying? That those first bits of fruit that come on the tree, the first crops that are ready to harvest, and you harvest them, he said, give the value of that to the Lord. Why? What's the value in that? What is that showing about you? You don't know how the rest is going to come out, do you? You might have a storm that destroys the rest of your crop. You might not have more crops. But by giving God the first fruit, what are you saying? I'm trusting you, God. You meet my needs. I'm obeying you. I'm giving what you ask up front. I'm not going to wait and see. Because, you know, the truth is, if we wait till the end of the month and we give what's left over, what are we going to give? Probably something like this. But the idea here is give God what he's due and give it up front to show that you trust. That's why when Jesus was standing by the temple that day, watching everybody give with the disciples, who did he say to give the most? The widow, who just put in 2 of the smallest coins ever made. And he said she gave more. Why? Because she gave it all. She is throwing herself completely on the grace and mercy of God to provide for her. You can tell by Jesus' words that God was going to honor that. Proverbs 11, 24 and 25.
One gives freely and gains even more. Another withholds unjustly and comes poverty. A soul who blesses will prosper, and one who gives water will himself be satisfied.
Here I just summarize it by saying, be generous. God says, as you give, he's going to take care of you. If you withhold, he might withhold from you. So it's another one of those ways of saying, you reap what you sow. If you're generous, God says, I'll take care of you. So you can give generously. Or as 2 Corinthians says, give with great joy. Be cheerful as a giver. Proverbs 28:27 says,
One who gives to the poor will not lack, but one who shuts his eyes will have many curses.
now here we have many opportunities to give to the poor. Okay, I know that sometimes we're hesitant because, well, maybe they're ripping us off. Well, you just have to trust the Lord and ask Him, who should you give to and in what ways should you give? I've said before, I have a daughter-in-law who likes to ride around in her car with extra food. So when she sees those signs at the street corner, wherever she's driving, that says, help, I'm homeless, I need food, instead of giving money, which may be used for other things than food, she has the food ready to give to them. So if that's the need, she's able to meet that need. So the idea here is not all the money has to be given in the church. We're not a church that says that. You can find people that need whatever, and you can help supply that need. It doesn't all have to be given here. You find ways to give to the Lord, okay? Maybe your home church, or maybe people back where you are from need some help and you're able to help them. So these are ways that God says, give part of what I allow you to have in your hands back to me. Don't be afraid to be generous. Now, the last main use of money that I think Proverbs talks about is savings. So, Proverbs 13:22 says,
Good man leaves an inheritance to his grandchildren, but the sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous.
So here it's saying that if you're prudent, you'll leave a legacy behind. Not only just giving to your children, but thinking of setting something up to help even the next generation after that. It's not that you have to provide for all of their life, but it's saying you can help them to get a start. So I know many parents who've helped put aside money for the schooling of their children or grandchildren. They started when they were younger, so they were able to provide more as that investment grew. Proverbs 21:20 says,
Precious treasure and oil are in a wise person's dwelling, but a foolish person devours all he has.
so he's saying here what's precious, which is talking about even olive oil, which is used for medicines and cooking and so forth. He says that those who are prudent, they have it available. In other words, they know how to save, how to store it up, and not just expend it on today's needs. With the foolish do what? It's gone, okay? And there's nothing for the rainy day or the tomorrow when they don't get their paycheck or they're laid off. So he is commending those who are prudent enough, wise enough to save something for future needs, for that rainy day. And Proverbs 10:15.
The rich man's wealth is his strong city. The destruction of the poor is their poverty.
So here I think the idea is that having extra, having saved something up, will provide that protection, again, from unexpected expenses or calamities that may come to you or people in your family or your friends. And you'll have it. It's a protection, okay? But the poor, he's got nothing saved up. So when the calamity comes, he's gone. He's wiped out. He has to borrow or whatever. So here are, I think, the three ways that we should learn how to use our money. Yes, some of it's for spending. We need to learn how to save some. That's a hard thing to do, isn't it? Especially with inflation and costs going up. But it's still something we need to do, even if we start off in small degrees. But I especially want to encourage you to teach your children or grandchildren how to use money. We're not always good at that, okay? And maybe some of you can give a testimony that your parents didn't tell you what to do with money, so when you got it, what happened to it? It was like water. It was gone. Okay? But you need to teach your children, because if they learn early what to do with their money, that they use them in these three ways. Learn, some of it's for spending, but not all of it. Start putting some aside as a child. I know my wife did. She had work that she did. She mowed lawns in her neighborhood and saved up some money, and that's what helped her to go to college. She learned how to save as a younger child. Now, I'm not telling you what percentages to use. That's something you have to work out with your own family. But I'm going to just throw out that spending, I would encourage you not to encourage them to spend more than 25% of the money that they get. Why? Because it's a habit. If you form a habit early of spending all you get, that's a bad habit to go into adulthood with. Giving, I'm going to suggest between 10 and 20%. If nothing's magic about it. If it needs to be less or more, that's fine. I'm just throwing out a possible point of discussion between you as parents or grandparents. And then for saving, I would encourage you to encourage them to save half of it. So that means that when you give them money, and I do want to encourage you not to just give them money, but give them chores or tasks that they can do for the family, for you individually, that would help you and put them to work, help them to learn responsibility by learning a job well and being faithful in it, so that when you give them the money, then you help them to know what to do with it. Now for our children, I had 3 little cans, and we wrote on them these 3 things. This is for saving, this is for spending, and this is for church. Okay, this is for giving to the Lord. So when you give it, don't just give them a dinar, but give them coins so that you can help them start as children learning what to do with the money. So they can put 15 to 25% as spending money, more set aside for the giving, and then teach them to learn how to save. And don't let them get in that savings account without a special family counsel. But please remember that these percentages are just for childhood. As they grow older, as they grow into adulthood, these percentages will change. And then, when they want something, and don't they always want something when you go to the store? You can see it in any store here. Mom, I need a new ball. I need a candy bar. I need a new game. And so, what do most parents do? Okay, we'll buy it. What do they learn from that? They're learning to expect you to provide everything for them. They're learning to be entitled. You owe this to me. I'm your child. I need this. I want this. And you know what? If you give it to them, how long do they play with it? 1 day, 2 days, maybe a week at the most, and then that thing is lost. Why? Because they have nothing invested in it. So you need to teach them delayed gratification. So when I took my children to the store, and they said, Dad, I want a new ball. I said, well, how much is it? Oh, it's 2 dinars. I said, well, how much do you have in your spending can? $1.50. I said, better wait a little bit then. Better wait until you get at least 2 dinars in. And you know what happened? Most of the time, by the time they got 2 dinars in, they didn't want the ball. So teach delayed gratification so you're not just giving them everything that they want every time that they turn around. Because, listen, your children, they're psychologists. You know, when you're busy and you don't have time for them, they know that. And they know you feel guilty. So they like to play on that. Oh, Dad, really, I need this. And so you go, okay, well, I didn't get to do this or this. Okay. See, they got you. They got you. All right? But you can teach them good use of money that will set them on target for the rest of their lives. So teach your children. And by the way, one more advertisement in here about giving. When your children get ready to go to any children's church or Sunday school, do not give them money to put in the offering. I read one story of a little girl, the mother gave her $0.25 and $1. Said, okay, you keep one and you give one to Sunday school. When she came home from the Sunday school, the mom said, well, which way did you give to God? She said, well, I was going to give the $1. But then the pastor said that when you give, you should be cheerful. So I thought, I would be more cheerful if I kept the $1. So I only gave the $0.25. But if you give your child money to put in the offering, what do they learn about giving? Nothing. They'll only give as long as you put money in their hands. Is that what you want them to think about giving? No. Giving should come from the heart. So I want to encourage you. Give them a job to do so that they do it and they earn that money and then they're giving of their money to the Lord. And that's the lesson. You know, many churches here in this part of the world are struggling today. Most of them are supported from the outside. You know why? Nobody taught the children to give. I remember again a quote from Mr. Rockefeller, the wealthy entrepreneur and philanthropist. He said, I would not have been able to tithe on my first million if I had not learned to tithe on my first weekly paycheck, which was $1.50. Because he learned early when he was earning a little, he could give big when he made big. So teach your children how to give of their own money. Now, another key verse, Proverbs 21:5. The plans of the diligent lead surely to advantage, but everyone who is hasty comes surely to poverty. Really what this is talking about when it says the plans of the diligent, this idea for plan, that word could also be translated count or calculate. So it's saying if you learn how to plan and calculate the use of your money, then you'll come to advantage. You'll have gain. You'll have profit is the idea. But if you don't, if you just hastily squander everything that goes between your fingers, then he says, that's going to be a bad lifestyle. You're not going to really enjoy life. So I would say, basically, this is talking about learning how to budget. Again, I want to put a plug in for Dave Ramsey. I think he's done more for more people. You know what he did after he went bankrupt? He got to studying the Bible. He was a Christian, but he said, I didn't have a clue what the Bible said about money. So somebody challenged him and started working with him. They started studying out what the Bible said. And then he came up with these principles that he presents. And tens of thousands of people have gotten out of debt by following his simple plan. By the way, you can download his video sessions from this book here called Financial Peace. There's about 10 of them, I think. And they're 30 to 60 minutes long. But if you follow that plan, you can be helped on how to organize and how to budget your money. He has a simple plan where you can even order what he calls an envelope system. You open it up, and you put an envelope for your rent and for your food and for so forth, and he tells you how to very carefully plan out the use of your money so that you can succeed in life. And that's what this whole idea is. By the way, there's a book too that him and his daughter have written, especially for youth, in a video series. I hope we can do for the youth group someday here. But again, when you plan out your budget, make sure you put God in the budget. And remember his promise, my God shall supply all of your needs according to his riches and glory. Now, when he gave this promise to Philippians, why could he promise to them? He could say, you don't have to worry. God has promised to meet all of your needs. Why could he say that to them? Because in the early verses of Philippians 4:15 and 16, he says, it's because you gave sacrificially. When you're a giver to God, then God says, I'll give back to you. I'll take care of your needs. Now, he didn't say he'd give you all your wants, but he did promise to meet your needs. And another verse in the New Testament to just reinforce these principles in Proverbs. These are true, and they're reinforced even in the New Testament. In Luke, Jesus said, he who was faithful in a very little thing is faithful also in much. So giving to God starts even with small amounts. Okay, now there's some other verses. If you want to look someday to see all the different warnings about money, there's so many more. Like I said, there's 150 verses. We just touched the hem of the garment. But I want to close with this question. What changes do you need to make in how you think about or how you use your money? Because that's the bottom line. It's not just what we talk about or what we listen to. It's about what you do with what you hear. Your use of money that God puts in your hands is a good barometer or thermometer about your spiritual life. It says a lot about where your priorities are. So I don't know you well enough to tell you what your take-home should be, but I trust God, the Holy Spirit, to be talking to your heart because this is an important area of your life that he wants to be glorified by. Let's close in a word of prayer. Father, I want to thank you again for this very practical teaching on money. Lord, maybe it's not what we want to hear, but it's what you say about it, and you very much care about how we steward what you place in our hands. Thank you for the life you've given us, for the minds, the bodies, the experiences, for the jobs you've given us. Lord, help us to steward what you give us well, and help us to learn how to spend within a budget, to stay within our means, not borrow what we don't have for something we don't really need. I pray, too, that you'd help us to be givers, Lord, that you would prompt our heart where to give to your cause. Help us to have your discernment on how to give back to you, as well as give us that wisdom to know how to save for future needs. This I pray in Jesus' name.